Let's now talk about the the 6 teams that are in this wild card race right now in the National League, who fall under that wild card teams who made a push to contend at the deadline. And we'll start the team that I think did the most, and they certainly did the most when it comes to the prospects they gave up. AJ Preller was on his game again. He trades a absolute haul of prospects to create a super bullpen. Tanner Scott, Jason Adam, Brian Hoeing all joined the fold. Then kind of a last minute Martin Perez for the rotation trade that I'm sure they didn't give it much of anything for. But that bullpen with Scott and Adam in particular entering the back end, it's pretty damn good.
Is it a super bullpen? Is it, or is it just a pretty good bullpen? Now, look, these guys are all having great years.
Yeah.
But if we're talking, and again, relievers aren't necessarily household names, but even for an average baseball fan, are you going, hey, so what do you think? Adam and Suarez and Tanner Scott? I mean, come on, right? You're going, what team is that? Like, I wonder how many folks know what squad that is. Now, again, 2 of those 3 guys were all-stars. Jason Adam doing a wonderful job, as a lot of guys are kind of unknown down in Tampa Bay's bullpen. So, yeah, they bring those guys in. They probably give up a lot more than they should have. But if you're just looking at the additions, I think they're really solid. But to me, I'm not blown away by 2 innings at best in any given game, right? Like, what about the other 7? We discussed the fact that their rotation, forgetting the postseason when you're just looking at the top 3 guys, but just now still in the regular season, you've got some questions, and Yu Darvish being out is bad. Joe Musgrove, you got to see if you can get something from him. Dylan Cease, you've got no worries or issues with, but I still have questions right now with the Padres. It's nice that, they've won a couple games in a row. They took down the Dodgers in a big way. They're 9-1 in their last 10. But I'm not as impressed, I think, with what the Padres did. It's like they got 2 kind of flashy guys, right? Just because they're in the bullpen and you're going to use them in the 7th and 8th, and it's going to shut things down really well. They didn't really address any of the other areas of concerns. I don't know if there was another shortstop out there that they could have gotten in the back of the bullpen. Look, Lucas Ursig, he used to be a position player. Was he a shortstop? Can we look this up? They should have gotten Lucas Ursig so that they could have had a shortstop at every position. They should have gotten Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. He played shortstop. He could have been a catcher. You could have had all 9. AJ Preller, what are you doing? Get serious.
Here's what I'd say, because I think ultimately, if you look at the prospects they gave up for what they got back, you could in a vacuum say horrible deadline. What I would say is, in this wild card race, I believe they have moved past all these other teams where I think I would be surprised if they don't make it. And the reason why I call it a super bullpen, Robert Suarez, 1.48 ERA in the season. Tanner Scott, he has a 1.18 ERA in the season. Jason Adam has a 2.44 ERA in the season. And Jeremiah Estrada is striking out 14 batters per 9, has a 2.66 ERA in the season. Our boy Yuki Matsui is like 7th in their bullpen, got a 3.38 ERA. He likes what Preller's doing for his team. And I think that they have, at least when it comes to this year in particular, moved themselves to a point where they should, in my eyes, make the playoffs for sure, especially because they have the weakest schedule remaining of anyone else. That when you combine winning percentage for the rest of their schedule, their strength of schedule, it's a 475 winning percentage. The teams they're going to square off against. So I think they're going to be in it. I think long-term, maybe not the best deadline, but I think for this year in particular, I think they swung for the fences and they made themselves a team that's dangerous, because in the playoffs, if you get there with that bullpen and you can get through your starting pitcher with a lead, you can win a lot of those close games.
They may have swung for the fences, but they've got double pop. That's it. It was not a home run. And the additions of Adam and Scott added a total of a whopping 3 innings of postseason experience. So that, I feel like, is a critical piece that we're not necessarily discussing. When we look at what some of these other teams went out and did that are like, well, Nick Meters, this was a guy that was waived, just a year and a half ago. But is he going to have as good of a second half or the final 2 months as a Jason Adam or a Tanner Scott? Could be. Except the big difference is the Brewers didn't have to give up quite as much as an AJ Preller. So I think you've got some some concerns. You've got some serious questions right now about AJ Preller. Is this just his final go round, and might as well empty all the prospect coffers to try to, make a run for this year's postseason, set yourself up for a decent start next year? Because I don't know how much more, how many more years of just emptying everybody out of your top 10, farm system rankings. How many more years you can do that? I don't. It seems like every year we've said this has got to be the last year, and then they do it again. But when they did it this year, all they acquired were 2 relief pitchers. So it's been a little bit of diminishing returns here. We'll see what happens. Let's talk about some of these other wild card teams, and if they did more to possibly sneak into one of the final 3 playoff spots.
Well, I'll move over to my Mets because I think the difference between the Mets and the Padres is they also added 3 bullpen arms, actually 4 if you count Tyler Zuber, who already got optioned to AAA. They did not trade a single prospect that really hurts. Now, they did give up for Jesse Winker, a decent starter in AA, and Tyler Stewart. For Paul Blackburn, they gave up a guy, Cade Morris, who's a 3rd-round pick last year that I liked, but I think best outcome, Cade Morris becomes something similar to what you're going to get in Paul Blackburn right now. Blackburn's going to make a start tonight. The Mets, across the month of July, they first pick up Phil Maton for cash or a player to be named later. We don't know. They get Ryan Stanek. They get Huascar Brazaban. They get Tyler Zuber. They get Paul Blackburn. And then they pick up Jesse Winker. I think that David Stearns did a masterful job at knowing where his team was, at giving them resources to help them get through the final 2 months. Brazaban and Zuber have options, so they have flexibility in that bullpen. They got some depth, but they also recognize that this thing can still go sideways, and they did not mortgage their future for a season that right now they're sort of playing with house money anyway.
David Stearns went to Goodwill and got himself a banging outfit. He looked great. I think I saw someone on The Athletic writing about it that it was maybe a little underwhelming, but you can't be disappointed at it because this was not necessarily supposed to be that year where they're going out and getting a Justin Verlander at the deadline. They've got a plan in place, and in the best possible way, the 2024 roster has impeded those plans. And it's the best possible way because they're contending now, and they weren't necessarily counting on that. They didn't need that to happen for their 5-10 year plan of winning a couple World Series. So for Stearns to go out and add to the big league roster in the way he did, I think he did a wonderful job dancing through the raindrops. I think those acquisitions are going to be a lot more valuable to the Mets than what the Padres got with their relievers.
Yeah, I think when you factor in cost of acquisition, absolutely. Because you know what? Stanek, Maton, Brazaban, those are probably right now with Daniel Nunez, Reed Garrett, and Sean Reed fully hurt. Those are pretty much your back-end set of men for Edwin Diaz right now. And you know what? If Edwin Diaz, who has been much better, ERA close to 1 over his past month and change here, if Edwin Diaz is Edwin Diaz, you don't need as much heavy lifting from the rest of the guys. So I like what they did. And Jesse Winker, funny enough, going into the deadline, I said I did not want the Mets to trade for Jesse Winker. But then when I saw the cost of acquisition, I was like, well, you know what? Jesse Winker, not a bad addition whatsoever. I don't know how great he's going to look in right field for the Mets, but he's sort of a 6-inning player. He's going to start the game, get the first 3 at-bats, then they'll throw Tyrone Taylor out there for defense to close things out. I think the Mets put themselves in a pretty good position to be one of these wildcard teams. The other one that I think is right there at the top of this race, and we're going to talk about the Braves in a minute, but the Diamondbacks. I think the Braves were all kind of expecting to make it. I think it's between, in my opinion, the Padres, the Mets, and the Diamondbacks as the main teams I'm looking at for those final 2 spots. And I like what the D-backs did. They get A.J. Puck. They get Dylan Floro, 2 arms for their bullpen. Christian Walker goes down. They pick up Josh Bell for pretty much nothing. I thought the Diamondbacks did well, again, sort of recognizing what they needed and not paying too much.
And their roster at the start of the year was really good. And they haven't had that roster. They've had so many guys injured, and they're starting to get those players back. And I think that's one of the reasons why they didn't invest that much more. But I don't necessarily know that they had to. They already had the guys that were there. So, to upgrade at a spot is going to cost that much more. And the Diamondbacks are in their window of contention right now, and they don't need to go all in and say, hey, this is our last shot. They've got so many young guys right now. So they just supplemented, and they did a great job. Christian Walker goes down. hey, there's a guy in the scrap heap that was just waived by the Marlins. Boom, you get Josh Bell. They did a nice job for what they needed to do.
And Josh Bell's been hot. I mean, before he got picked up, he had like 5 home runs in his last week with the Marlins. So, hey, maybe ride the hot hand for a couple weeks. Hopefully, you get Christian Walker back from that oblique not too long from now, and they can roll from there. Actually, not hopefully, as far as a Mets fan's concerned, because I don't want to see the Diamondbacks do well here, but I think they're really stiff competition for the Mets. The other team that I think is right there is the Cardinals, and they make you could if you want to just talk about who made the best trade. I mean, the Eric Fetty 3-teamer for them could not have worked out any better. Not only do you get Fetty, you get Tommy Pham back, and it must just be like an Albert Pujols thing, right? You put that Cardinals jersey back on, the superpowers come back, hits a grand slam in his first game, has 2 monster games in his return to St. Louis. I like what they did a lot. I think they only give up Edman, really, and they get a huge piece for their rotation, probably their number 2 starter. Tommy Pham slots into the middle of that lineup. I give them probably an A for what they did this deadline. They did great.
Sure. I don't know that I understood why they had to get rid of Dylan Carlson. They like Sean Thompson from the Rays, so you plug that guy in. He's yet to appear for the Cardinals. But in general, yeah, I think they did a nice job for this team that, again, was really just trying to supplement the roster. They sign all these older starting pitchers to say, you know what, we're not rebuilding exactly. We're kind of remodeling. And I think these moves fall in line exactly with that, considering they didn't have to give up very much, right? It really just was Tommy Edman there. So nice job by John Mozeliak.
I think so. Similar, the Pirates make a couple additions, and I thought that they were good ones. I mean, look, this is not the year where you expect to win the World Series, but if you get Paul Skeens into the playoffs, anything can happen. And so why not make some moves? But they weren't going to shop in the rental market. So they get 2 guys that I think not only helped them for this year, but really helped them for 2025 as well. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who we were all laughing at the Blue Jays for making that signing, and he's been very good this season. You plug him in wherever you need to in the infield, and you get Brian De La Cruz for your outfield. Not big splashy moves, but 2 bats in a lineup that desperately needed them. I think the Pirates did what they had to actually be buyers and stay in the race this season.
Yeah, and I like the acquisition of Nick York, who, again,
Yeah.
obviously they had to give up, I think, a fairly high price in a Quinn Priester, but that was a nice addition, and just investing in this roster and saying, okay, we gotta deal around the edges. We're not going to get anybody major, but still, in general, I think that was just a nice way of being aggressive to invest in this team. So. Might not be enough to get the job done, but they didn't sit still and they didn't sit on their hands.
Yeah, no, I think that they put themselves in the conversation. I wouldn't expect them to ultimately be there when it comes down to it, but playing competitive games into the 3rd week of September, that's not a bad thing for them. And their fan base, I'm sure, is going to love packing up that ballpark over that final month if they are in the fringes of the race. So I think they did a very nice job, which leads me to the last team of these wildcard teams. Is there a world where the Braves didn't do enough and they don't make the playoffs? I'll make the case for what could go wrong, which is just rotation ends up getting hit with injuries. Ronaldo Lopez, it seems like he's okay. Max Fried seems like he's okay. But if those 2 guys don't hold up for the rest of the season, they will be vulnerable. Overall, though, the trade for Jorge Soler seems like they absorb the salary and not a lot of risk there. I don't know how they're going to deal with him playing right field. That's going to be interesting. But if he holds up for the final 2 months, seems like a good addition to have put their lineup over the top because they needed bats.
This is one of the issues, for lack of a better term, when you put all your eggs in one basket. Now, it's a very good basket for Atlanta, but when they lock up all of these guys for as long as they did, if something goes wrong, it becomes hard to retool. That being said, how often are your 2 best players, an MVP and a Cy Young Award contender, go down in the same year? That's probably not going to happen. It's I don't know that we'll ever see 2 players that good out for an entire year like Atlanta's had to deal with ever again. I don't know. So, that being said, I think that was a great pickup. It was perfect bringing Soler back. They'll figure things out defensively. Michael Harris the second. I mean, shoot, he's gonna have to work his butt off there and in center field. Jared Kelenic, if he gets any opportunities over there, it's interesting to see what's gonna happen with Atlanta. But they just need to hold serve just a little bit, get to that postseason, let some of that magic, kind of take over once again. But given the roster of players that they had and the injury question marks, I don't know what else they really could have done. I think they did a nice job bringing back Soler and Luke Jackson.
Yeah, I think they did. Honestly, it was, clearly it was a trade where they ate sour because Luke Jackson even making a pretty good amount of money. I'm sure the Giants are happy to get off him. But I will say Luke Jackson, because I was looking at him as a target for the Mets, he had been pitching very well over the last couple weeks. So I imagine he'll go there, pitch to a sub-2. Soler will pop 14 home runs in 2 months, and the Braves will cruise to that first wild card spot. I don't think they're really in jeopardy, but they're more vulnerable than they've ever been. Beyond this season, that Soler trade is going to be really fascinating to me. I think for this year, made a lot of sense. Next year, assuming you get Acuna back, and then you still have Ozuna on the books at $16 million for a club option, it doesn't make sense to decline that just to have Soler be your DH. So we'll see. Maybe they trade Soler this offseason themselves. I think that might be the ultimate move. But for now, they got a lot better without having to give up much. And they probably invested at the deadline the proper amount on a team that has had everything go wrong for them. And, you mentioned that it probably won't happen again for a team to lose 2 players that good. I don't think that if it does happen again, I'd be surprised if there was a team that was able to weather that storm better than the Braves have, because I don't think there's many that would still be sitting in this position after those losses.
Yeah, that's key. That's key. I think I started doing a little activity on my own of, all right, who's the best position player, who's the best hitter, and who's the best pitcher on each team. And you take those top 2 players away, and you're right. I think Atlanta is the team that's best able to withstand those 2 major losses. You take away Paul Skeens and Brian Reynolds, from the Pirates. I mean, they're only barely above 500 right now. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the league, possibly. But for Atlanta to be, as good as they've been for the majority of the season, 10 games over 500, given those injuries, I mean, I think Brian Snitker and his staff has done a really great job.
Yeah, no, that they have, and they've done it too when you've got such a lack of performance from guys that you would have expected to pick up that slack. You would have expected Matt Olson. All right, you were an MVP candidate last year. Fill in for Acuna. Hasn't happened. And yet Ozuna has been that guy for them. Kelling's done a lot. They found a way. So that's going to be a fun race. The NL wildcard race down the stretch is going to be a lot of fun. We will be covering it here with Who's Better Baseball next week. We're going to have to revisit our number 1 topic on this show. Every couple months, you got to check in. Who's better, Gunnar or Witt? The conversation has changed since the last time we talked about it. We'll break it down on next week's show. As always, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Check out all of the shorts we have coming, the smaller videos, breaking up our full-length streams. Follow us at Who's Better BB. Also, follow us wherever you get your podcast to listen on the audio side. And we'll be back with another episode of Who's Better Baseball next week.